Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and this week has been an exciting week for World of Warcraft, whether you're checking out the WoW Remix Mists of Pandaria over on the Live Realms, or if you were checking out the Alpha build with this week's update. Personally, I've been very swamped with the newest updates for Pandaria and checking out the new mode and getting as many cosmetics, but I did find more time to spend over on the Alpha, and as part of our continued class coverage of the Alpha updates for War Within, I wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive at yet another set of hero specs, this time for the class of Druid. Out of all the classes, Druids are going to be the most unique one in the War Within, since they're getting access to 4 hero specs instead of the average 3, or 2 if you play a Demon Hunter. Since all 4 specs need to find something to share between one another, they get 4 hero specs, which opens up a ton of variety for gameplay and opportunity to experience Druid in so many different and fun ways. And as with the other hero talents from other classes, I wanted to do a bit of a deeper dive at everything the Druids are getting access to in the War Within Alpha, and go over both the thematic and the gameplay changes that will come whether you play a Druid as a Druid of the Claw, Elune's Chosen, a Wildstalker, or a Keeper of the Grove. As always, if you guys want to see more class coverage of the War Within Alpha, be sure to follow the channel. Otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, there's going to be a lot of hero specs for us to take a look at. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible with every single one of them, since Druids have access to 4 of them, but you'll know whether I'm successful at that or not, depending on the length of this video. Starting out, we have the Druid of the Claw, which is going to be shared between the Feral and the Guardian Bear Druids. Druids of the Claw are masters of the mighty animal forms. When they transform into cats or bears, they become ferocious physical combatants and protectors of the wild. What this hero spec is going to do is going to try to fuse components of the Guardian tankiness, but also the ferocity of a Feral Druid, and try to allow you to kind of dip into either aspect freely. So the prime ability is going to be Ravage, where your auto attacks have a chance to transform your next either Ferocious Bite or Maul into a Ravage, and move that slashes through targets in a wide arc, dealing physical damage per comm point to your target and consuming up to 25 additional energy, because it has elements of Bite for Feral Druids, to increase the damage by up to 100%. And the ability does have quite a bit of a wide arc to it, as it slashes with a kind of a cool animation, though it does end up kind of proccing a little bit more sporadically since it is based off of your auto attacks. To be honest, I don't really know why Blizz has done this a couple of times where they apply a tier set or now a buff or like an ability now with a procs of Feral's auto attacks. Technically, Ferals do attack pretty quickly. It's just so surprising how they keep leaning into the auto attack aspect of Feral Druid gameplay as often as they do. Either way, the actual Ravage ability is basically just an empowered version of Bite for Feral Druids and just an empowered Maul for Guardian, which ends up fitting well for either playstyle, especially if you prefer more of that instantaneous damage approach. From there on, Feral Druids can continue to build on it with Bestial Strength, where Ferocious Bite damage is increased by 5% and Primal Wrath's direct damage is increased by 50%. There was also an adjustment where Primal Wrath no longer utilizes your bleeds or consumes your bleeds to deal instantaneous damage, so that's why Primal Wrath is getting amped up by quite a bit here. But Ferocious Bite is getting amplified by a little, though it is going to be the prime way how you're going to be cleaving nearby foes with Ferocious Bite Rampant Ferocity combo. Further down, we have some utilities such as Pax Endurance. Stampeding Roar's duration is increased by 25%. Further down, we have a talent choice node between either cooldown reduction on Feral Frenzy with Tear Down the Mighty, or Strike of the Heart, which gives Shred, Brutal Slash, and Mango's critical strike chance and critical strike damage increased by 8%, which is fantastic for a Feral Druid that's all crit based, going to result in even more comm points that you can build. Left hand side, we have Fount of Strength, and this left hand side is what lets you delve into some of those cat and bear ability fusion, where your maximum energy and rage are being increased by 20%. Frenzy regeneration can also increase your maximum health by 10%. Further down below that, we have Wild Shape Mastery. Iron Fur and Frenzy Regen persist in cat form, as in if you use those abilities in bear form, shift into cat, all those effects continue to roll while in cat. This will be important for the bear side of things. When transforming from bear to cat, you retain 80% of your bear form armor and health for 6 seconds, which allows bear juice to dip into the cat form. We'll talk about that when we talk about the bear section of how this impacts your gameplay. And for 6 seconds after entering bear form, you will heal for 10% of damage taken over 8 seconds as a cat, which gives you other ways to recuperate a little bit of health. But also for Feral Druids, this gives you even more reason to shift into bear form in some of the high-end content like Mythic Raids, High Mythic Plus dungeons, or even more importantly, PvP. because you have some bear components where you do get some advantages in terms of armor increases and survivability increases. So when you do have to shift in bear form, there's going to be a little bit more defensive value from it as a feral druid. Further down, we have some of the more potentially interesting talents here, either a passive empowered shapeshifting, where Frenzy Regen can now be cast in cat form for 40 energy, quite a bit of survivability there. Bear form reduces magic damage you take by 4%, and Shred, Brutal Slash, and Mangle damage is decreased by 5%. Bunch of passives, but some of the gameplay options they offer to you can be interesting in certain situations. On the flip side is a more interesting, when tuned correctly, talent, Wild Power Surge. For Feral, Shred, and Brutal Slash grant Ursine potential. When you have 8 stacks, the next image transform into bear form, your next Mangle or Swipe deals 100% increased damage and generates 15 extra rage. Under normal conditions, this talent would be very difficult to use because you're telling me you have to shred a couple of times and then shift into bear form, then press Mangle or Swipe, then shift back into cat form, and then go back to your rotation. Is it going to be worth it? With the talent though of Fluid Form, Shred and Rake can be used in any form, which shifts you instantly into cat form. Mangle can be used in any form and instantly shifts into bear form, while Wrath and Starfire shifts into Moonkin form if you have the ability known. So if you are, let's say, in combat, you're walking up to train dummy, you hit a Mangle, immediately go into bear form. It cuts down the global of having to enter bear form in order to be able to take advantage of your feral-based abilities. There is a little bit of a concern behind this talent though, as the damage it amplifies for Mangle, which is supposed to be a single target ability, isn't all that high. Like if I build up all my stacks of my Ursine potential, it's 15k damage maybe at most. Maybe if it crits, it does something kind of sort of okay. That's really about it. It's not a lot of damage as it stands right now though. It's a lot better just to press Shred and ignore it. However, if you are using Ursine potential and you do end up stacking it up and you have Brutal Slash learned, then Brutal Slash actually does decent damage while in bear form because you still retain Brutal Slash while in bear. So you could do 53,000 damage to all enemies nearby, which is a decent number. Because when you shift back into cat, it goes down to 28,000. So maybe there you'll be going bear form, big swipe, and then back into cat. But I think these numbers need to be high enough where it's more than worth it for you to shift into bear, for you to press that Mangle, for you to press that swipe. Because right now, it just doesn't feel nearly as impactful, but it could be there. I'm just hoping they'll end up tuning it so that there's a reason for you to utilize the bear form to drop a big Mangle, to drop a big swipe. And I think that could be really fun because then you get some passive defenses out of it pretty regularly. And if you time it during right moments, this could give you, I guess, overall better survivability in some of the high-end content, but also fun reasons to shift into bear form at times. Then we have the main primary ability of Ravage, with the Ravage ability further amplified by Dreadful Wound. Ravage inflicts a bleed that causes damage over time to target and saps the victim of strength, reducing damage they deal to you by 5%. This will have some advantages for Feral, but also Guardian for different reasons. Dreadful Wound is not affected by Circle of Life or Death, however. If a Dreadful Wound benefiting from Tiger's Fury is reapplied, the new Dreadful Wound deals damage as if Tiger's Fury was active, so there's some components to make sure that the feral druids do not miss out on some of the snapshot elements. Right below that, we have Ruthless Aggression, where Ravage will increase your auto attack speed by 20% for 6 seconds, hopefully dropping you a bit more procs of Ravage in the turn. Or you go Killing Strikes, where Ravage increases your agility by 5% and the armor granted by Iron Fur by 20 for bears. And your first Tiger's Fury after entering combat makes your next Ferocious Bite a guaranteed Ravage, so it lets you kind of set up the combo from the top. Further down, we have Aggravate Wounds. Every finishing move, Shred, Thrash, or Brutal Slash you cast extends the duration of Dreadful Wound by 0.4 seconds up to additional 6 seconds, which just gives you passive bleeds because you are going to be using your abilities pretty regularly, so it's just going to extend it naturally. And lastly, your Capstone Claw Rampage, where during Berserk, Shred, Brutal Slash, and Thrash have a 25% chance to make an next Ferocious Bite or Ravage, which gives you a little bit more burst inside of a primary damage window. For Guardian Druids, we do see some adjustments specifically in the talent tree, like Maul and Raise being buffed by Bestial Strength, or cooldown reduction of things like Pulverize in the Tear Down the Mighty. But also some of the shifts from Bear to Cat abilities, such as Ravage being procced by Maul in the opener, as well as Maul, Raise, Mangle, Thrash, all increasing the duration of Dreadful Wounds, and Mangle, Swipe, and Thrash having a 25% chance to make a next Maul into Ravage. But for the most part, the gameplay doesn't really shift too much differently from Feral as well as Bear Druid. Druid of the Claw for the most part emphasizes what bears and cats are known for, primarily the physical damage, the bleed aspect, the big bites, the more instantaneous output, and simply leaning into some of the more core gameplays of a Guardian as well as a Feral. However, playing around with both of these, there were some differences in experience. As for Feral, for the most part, this is just an upgrade with a better bite of a Ravage, with some defensive bear potential for some high-end content, but you don't really get to utilize that cat bear aesthetic as much. As right now, some of those bear damage elements are not fully functional, or at least they don't really feel all that functional at the moment. But you do get to buff your overall basic class kit, which I think is going to work out fairly well. For bear, however, there are some very interesting components, especially with this bear hybrid playstyle. As with Wild Power Surge together with Fluid Form, you are kind of encouraged to go into cat form, which is going to cause your next cat form to gain 5 comp points instantly, and your bite or rip will deal 50% increased damage once you build up 6 stacks of feline potential. And under normal conditions, bears outside of bear form fall over easily. And they recently kind of tuned up the difficulty and the damage that we take inside of normal dungeons for alpha testing, where bosses don't fall over as easily, and sometimes you do get to feel some of the damage components, so there's some room for healers to stretch the legs even a little. So there are moments where you actually do take damage. So to say this, to go into cat form while as a Guardian and actually be survivable for a couple of auto attacks was insane, because every fiber of my body said, don't be in cat form, you're a bear, this is stupid, but it worked because you'll have all those defensive benefits of bear still rolling in cat form. You get to pop in, get some a big bite, couple of swipes here and there, do some damage, and it even allows you to kind of lean into some of this feral focused gameplay, which gives Guardian Druid cat weaving potential. Like in raids, when you're not directly tanking the boss, there's opportunity for you to go into cat form, get some damage out as much as possible, do as much output when you can, sink a big bite into a target that needs to be taken down as quickly as possible. And then you go back into bear form and you're sturdy just like as ever before, but you have this aggressive potential to weave in into cat, do some damage, back out. And I feel like when it comes to high-end content, bear druids have a potential to utilize this to really expand their gameplay, where they're no longer shackled in a single animal form, but can fluidly utilize both of them depending on the situation to fully maximize their damage. And I feel like for Guardian Druid, Druid of the Claw offers some of the most interesting parts of gameplay that I hope will end up making their way into the metagame, because shifting into cat and back into bear and utilizing both forms effectively actually was very fun for me as a Guardian Druid. It makes me excited about this hero spec from a bear perspective. And from Druid of the Claw, I want to now move on to the Wildstalker Druid. Wildstalkers live amongst the remote wilds, hunting to perpetuate the cycle of life and death, and destroy those who would despoil nature, and using their healing powers to restore life to the barren spaces. And out of all the hero specs for druids, this one is probably going to be the most controversial. Potentially, you'll see what I mean as we get into some of the talents in the gameplay. But before we go down that track, I do want to go over some of the talents that the Wildstalkers are going to be able to bring with things like Thriving Growth. This is your main ability that's going to shape Wildstalker, but you're not really going to notice it. Rip and Rake damage has a chance to cause your Bloodseeker vines to grow on the victim, dealing bleed damage over 4.8 seconds. While Wild Growth and Regrowth healing has a chance to cause symbiotic blooms to grow on the target, healing for additional healing over time, and multiple instances of these effects can overlap. And from that point forth, we have a bunch of little passive abilities that just kind of empower aspects of the Wildstalker gameplay. Like on the right hand side, we have things like Wildstalker's Power, with Rip and Bite dealing additional damage while Rejuve heals for additional healing. Further down, we have some defensive components such as Bond with Nature, where healing you receive is increased by 10%, or Harmonious Constitution, where your regrowth healing on yourself is increased by 50%. Further down there, we have Twin Sprouts. Whenever a Bloodseeker Vine or a Symbiotic Bloom grow, they have a 20% chance to cause another growth of the same type to immediately grow on another valid nearby target. Or you can go with Implant. Whenever you gain or lose Tiger's Fury, your next single target melee ability causes a Bloodseeker Vine to grow on the target for 4 seconds, which gives you a little bit more Blood Vine consistency. Where for Restoration Druids, that ability is going to be Swiftmend that causes Symbiotic Bloom to grow on the target for 4 seconds. On the left hand side, we have Hunt Beneath the Open Skies. Damage and healing while in cat form is increased by 5%, and Moonfire and Subfire damage is increased by 10%, which may have Feral Druids leaning into Elune Inspiration potentially going forward. Below that, we have Lethal Preservation. When you remove an effect with Soothe or remove Corruption, you gain a combo point and heal for 4% of your maximum health, which is cool. This encourages some utility and party value in group situations. If you are at full health, however, an injured party or raid member will be healed instead, which is also awesome. Fantastic option for dungeons. Right below that, we have another choice node between Resilient Flourishing, where Bloodseeker Vines and Symbiotic Blooms last additional few seconds. When a target afflicted by Bloodseeker Vines dies, the vines jump to a valid nearby target for the remaining duration. On the opposite side, we have Root Network. Each active Bloodseeker Vine increases the damage of your abilities by 2%, while each Symbiotic Bloom increases the healing of spells by 2%. And then we have the middle row with Strategic Infusion. Tiger's Fury and Attack from Prowl increases the chance of Shred, Rake, and Brutal Slash to critical strike by 8% for 6 seconds, which is kind of big when it comes to your resource generation. Cast and Regrowth increases the chance for your periodic heals to critical heal by 8% for 10 seconds. Then we have another choice node with Flower Walk. During Barkskin, your movement speed is increased by 10%, and every second flowers grow beneath your feet, they heal up to 3 nearby injured allies for a bit of healing, which doesn't seem like a lot since we're going to be running around with 3 million health or so in the next expansion, but hopefully they'll end up adjusting this number in the future. Again, more party utility. Or Entangling Vortex, where enemies pulled by Ursul's Vortex also rooted in place for 3 seconds. Damage may cancel this effect, a little bit more controlled if you're really trying to keep enemies away from you. Right below that, we have Bursting Growth, a passive. Whenever Bloodseeker Thorns expire or you use a Ferocious Bite on the target, they explode in thorns, dealing physical damage to nearby enemies. But when a Symbiotic Bloom expires, you cast Rejuvenation on the target, where flowers will grow around the target, healing them and up to 3 nearby allies for a little bit of healing. And then finally, we have the capstone of Vigorous Creepers. Bloodseeker Vines increase the damage your abilities deal to the affected enemies by 10%, a sizable amount, while Symbiotic Blooms increase the healing your spells do to the affected targets by 8%, which is a passive way where you do 10% more damage to enemies, and with these beads that can kind of ramp up over each other and overlap one another, that can be up to 20% and maybe even 30% depending if you're lucky. That being said, however, that's really about all I can say about Wildstalker. Besides this, it is a very, very passive hero spec out of all of them. And while it does have some components in things like AoE content where you can get a bunch of enemies blood up all at once, and there could be some fun to be had there, and the passive damage increases that it offers could be interesting in some way or another, that's really about all I can really say about it. It is still a very, 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 very incredibly passive type of a hero spec. Even visually, as I'm hitting these dummies, you can kind of see just how very little you can actually see of these vines. They're just very, very small in there. And that's where I think is the biggest problem that I have with this hero spec, not for the performance and the damage that it could do, because the damage so far in the alpha has been decent, or at least more or less what you would expect with some of the other hero specs when you were trying to compare them against one another. The visual aspects of Wildstalker, thematics of it, are just not really there, and that's my biggest issue with it. But with that being said, I really don't like Wildstalker as a hero spec because I feel like it just doesn't feel like a hero spec. You know, when you play a warrior and you're playing a mountain thane or a slayer, there is visual identity. There is some rotational changes where mountain thane will stomp around, there's lightning everywhere, a slayer will have blades coming out of every orifice with just slashes wildly, and there's just visual identity, there's some rotational identity. It doesn't complicate either playstyle, but it does have some of its own uniqueness behind it. Or Ride of the Apocalypse Death Knight versus a Death Reaper Death Knight. One has his army of horsemen by his side, while the other is reaping and tearing apart the soul of their foes to shreds. And there's some awesome aspects behind it where you're not necessarily making the rotation worse or complex. It's, for the most part, stays about the same with like an interesting gameplay hook or two. But there's also that visual identity. There's that utilitarian identity behind it. And Wildstalker probably would perform really well, but it just doesn't have like a cool thematic aspect to it. But maybe you will like Wildstalker a lot more than I do. I just find this one visually, thematically more muted than everything else that's available on the table. But from there on, I want to move on into the Elune's Chosen, and we'll start looking at them from a Boomkin perspective from the get-go, just because it fits Boomkin super well. Elune's Chosen dedicate themselves to the Moon Goddess, increasing your control over the moon and the stars, infusing their abilities with astral might to call down potent lunar magic from the sky. This one fits like a glove for Balanced Druid in particular, but it's also actually very surprisingly good and actually a popular choice in the alpha so far for Guardian Druids whenever I play with any. Your prime ability is going to be Boundless Moonlight, which is just going to enhance your primary arcane abilities, being Fury of Elune, Full Moon, and Lunar Beam, giving them additional effectiveness or additional resources. And this is available for all 3 specs, where even Guardian Druids will actually be able to utilize, if they talent correctly, into Fury of Elune value, generating additional rage and doing a bunch of additional damage. But from there on, you get to augment the Druid with some passive ways, and the final row of talents is where things are going to get very interesting. The first row we have Glistening Fur. Bear form and Moonkid form reduce all arcane damage taken by 6% and other magic damage taken by 3%. Magic damage reduction for Bear Druid, very happy to see that in general. Lunar Insight gives Moonfire 10% additional damage, while Moon Guardian causes Moonfire and Starfire to generate additional astral power, while free automatic Moonfires from Galactic Guardian for Bear generate additional rage. In our next row, we have a choice note between Elune's Grace, where using Wild Charge while in Bear form or Moonkid form incurs a 3-second shorter cooldown so you can move around more often. Or Moon Dust, where enemies afflicted by Moonfire are slowed by 30%. In the middle row, we have Atmospheric Exposure, where enemies damaged by Full Moon, Fury of Elune, or Lunar Beam take 4% increased damage from all of your attacks for 6 seconds. In the next row, we have Lunar Amplification, which is one aspect of this Lunar gameplay. Each non-arcane damage and ability you use increases the damage of your next arcane damage and ability by 3%, stacking up to 3 times. And for all I've been able to test out so far, this could work for things such as Fury of Elune. This could work things for such as New Moon, but also simple things such as Starfall, Star Surge, and even Moonfire. So you will try to see if you can line this up with some of your bigger damaging abilities if you can to achieve maximum value. And in the next row, we actually get some gameplay changing elements. First, we have another choice node with Arcane Affinity. All arcane damage of your spells is increased by 3%. Or you can go with Lunation, where arcane abilities reduce the cooldown of Fury of Elune by 2 seconds, Half Moon and Full Moon by 1 second, and your arcane abilities reduce the cooldown of Lunar Beam for Bear by 3 seconds, which is an interesting cooldown reduction ability that gives you more frequent uses of some of your major tools. In the middle row, we have another interesting choice, either a Astral Insight, which amplifies your Incarnation, or Convoke Spirits, where Incarnation, Chosen of Elune, and Guardian of Ursoc increase arcane damage from spells and active abilities by 10%, or increases the duration and the number of spells cast by Convoke by 25%. On the flip side, you can go with the Light of Elune, where Moonfire damage has a chance to call down Fury of Elune to follow your target for 3 seconds, works for both Bear as well as Boomkin. And Fury of Elune, this proc one, could also benefit from Boundless Moonlight, where Fury of Elune will at the end have a flash of energy, blasting enemies for astral damage. For Bear form, this will also generate your rage, while for Boomkin this generates your astral power, and this effect seems to proc fairly regularly too. Then on the left hand side we got yet another choice node, which is another set of impactful abilities, either Stellar Command, which increases the damage of your Fury of Elune, Full Moon, or Lunar Beam by 15 or 30%, which can combine pretty well together with Lunar Amplification, or Embrace the Moon completely with Lunar Calling. Starfire deals 40% increased damage to its primary target, but no longer triggers Solar Eclipse. Thrash now deals arcane damage, and its damage is increased by 12%. So either Boomkin or a Guardian, you are going to see some actual damaging components, where with this talent, if you go full on Boomkin, you can spam Starfire as much as you want to. You're never achieving a Solar Eclipse again with this talent. You are committed to the Guardian of the Moon. You are a Lunar Guardian. You are not going to be bathing in warm sunfire and solar eclipses. You're all about that lunar eclipse. That's all you are. And this basically gives you a one-track mind where your Starfire becomes your single target ability. This is some gameplay and thematic changes that a Balanced Druids can achieve with this hero spec, and I think it's an interesting component. I don't know if this one will be even like the best challenge choice out of all of them, but this definitely does give you a very much one-track mind of a playstyle, and I find it super unique and super interesting, because it gives you a very specific way that you could be utilizing your eclipses where you're only benefiting from lunar eclipse. However, when you do place Incarnation, you are getting both the benefits of Solar Eclipse and Lunar, so if you want to empower abilities such as Star Surge, you totally can. But there's some interesting components there to be had either way that could actually have some rotation altering elements as well. Your final capstone for Elune's Chosen is going to be the Eternal Moon, further increasing the power of Boundless Moonlight, where Fury of Elune, Flash of Energy now generates actual power, rage, and damage increased by 50%. New Moon and Half Moon now also call down a Crescent Moon for additional resources and damage, while Lunar Beam increases Mastery by additional 7%, deals 30% increased damage, and lasts 3 seconds longer. So overall, I'm actually very excited for Elune's Chosen. Out of all the hero specs so far, this one is very flavorful. There are some rotational adjustments here too that don't necessarily disrupt your rotation either. And for Guardian Druids, all this does is really emphasize that whole arcane hybridy playstyle that started to become popular with Guardian Druids towards the beginning of Dragonflight, and you're simply leaning into all of those elements and enhancing them. Which, for both of them, this creates a playstyle that's not complicated for either Boomkin or Guardian, while still gives you the thematic elements of Elune's Chosen and the arcane stuff and the arcane damage, which is awesome to really see and play around with. And overall, I had a very pleasant experience with Elune's Chosen when it comes to testing it out so far on the alpha. And with that being said, I now want to move on to the Keeper of the Grove. Keepers of the Grove take inspiration from Cenarius' mighty children to protect the balance of nature and safeguard the dream. They channel the power of the dream to strengthen their spells and summon empowered treants to protect their allies and crush their enemies. So for Boomkin, where Elune's Chosen was mostly emphasizing arcane abilities, Keeper of the Grove has more of this nature elements leaning, but not necessarily through nature damage and abilities, but certain nature-y abilities such as regrowth and wraths and even summoning your treants thematically. And your primary ability is going to be Dream Surge. Whenever you summon your Force of Nature or treants as a resto, you gain charges of Dream Surge, which causes your next Wrath or Starfire to explode on the target, dealing additional nature damage to nearby enemies, or empower your next healing spell as a Restoration Druid, which we'll take a look at the restoration side of things after we go over the Boomkin very quickly. From there on, we have some passive options such as Protective Growth, where your regrowth protects you, reducing damage you take by 8%, while regrowth is on you, which for Boomkin you would think, okay, maybe you'll get some elements out of it, but there's actual talents to better support Protective Growth in order to make it more of an easy to acquire defensive. A little further down we have Grow's Inspiration, which is going to buff the basic aspects of your playstyle, with either Wrath and Starfire damage increases by 10%, while Regrowth and Wild Growth healing is increased by 6%. Or Potent Enchantments, where Orbital Strike that applies Stellar Flare lasts for additional few seconds and deals more damage. Or Greater Alignment Talent that empowers Incarnation will last for additional 20 seconds and increase the Eclipse damage during Incarn by additional 5%. Further down below that, we have the Blooming Infusion, which is how you're going to be able to get some benefits out of Protective Growth. Though this talent is weird and may encourage some interesting gameplay, to say the least. Blooming Infusion. Every 5 regrowths you cast makes the next Wrath, Starfire, or Entangle Root instant and increases damage it deals by 100%. Every 5 Star Surges or Starfalls you cast makes the next Regrowth or Entangle Roots instant. Now, generally, the way you would play around this talent is, this I think is meant to be a way of, oh, okay, you use some damage and abilities, here we go, here's a free ability to give yourself a little bit more utility, give yourself a little more survivability, or rather for restoration, oh, you're healing your allies, alright, here's a free B damage or a free Entangle Root if you need some assistance to keep enemies away from you, for instance. I don't think they're really intended for it to be a damage and rotation or part of the way that a Boomkin may set up their burst. However, increasing the damage of Wrath or Starfire by 100% is enticing. What this may end up creating is maybe a bit potentially degen style gameplay, but I'll explain that in a second. So when you cast Regrowth 5 times, 1, 3, did I get the proc early? I got the proc early. Blooming Infusion, the next Wrath, Starfire, and Entangle Root are instant and deal 100% more damage. Just cast them real quickly, and it does quite a bit. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can combine the damage of that ability together for balanced druids, because there's actually quite a lot of talents that can buff the damage of Wrath. Like, for instance, let's say you're trying to find ways to utilize Blooming Infusion, in which may lead to Boomkins trying to, let's say, cast a couple of regrowths before combat begins in order to set up this weird combo in order to create some of the bigger burst situations of potential. So when you take a look at a lot of the talents, there's a lot of ways to buff things like Wrath or Starfire, like Grove's Inspiration, or Crit Chance with Wild Surges, or Umbral Intensity with the Solar Eclipses, or Nature's Grace, which actually can be gamed a little, or Astral Smolder, which leaves a dot based on the damage that Wrath or Starfire does, so the harder it hits, the better the dot. Plus Umbral Embrace, where Wrath and Starfire have a 20% chance to cause the next Wrath or Starfire to be cast as an Eclipse, and deal 100% increased damage, with it being an Astral damage ability whenever you have Celestial Alignment, Astral damage benefits from both nature and arcane buffs, so you have a situation where a druid may actually start using regrowths to set up a burst combo in an opener, potentially against an enemy target. And if you set it up correctly, and on a level 75 druid, which isn't wearing the best gear on the alpha by any measure, you can do damage that's about a third of your entire health bar if it crits. Now, it takes a second to set it up, but it's not unrealistic to set it up in the opener, even for a PvE environment. All you have to do is cast regrowths before an opener, and then you actually have an opportunity to set up that kind of a combo fairly easily, which may create a weird situation where players will start potentially using Blooming Infusion in a more degen aspect. Like before a fight starts, you will actually cast a bunch of regrowths to make sure that you're able to achieve your combat buff. Then you're gonna get your proper opener, go into full eclipse, and try to get a really fatty Wrath or Starfire from the get-go. This could create a weird situation where you're using regrowth to buff the damage of your boomkin abilities. This isn't unusual. Feral Druids used to use it before, as it tied to certain talents like press regrowth to make an next bite or make an next rip do more damage. And that whole talent setup and that rotational playstyle, the devs have moved away from a while ago because they found that it kind of disrupted the feeling and the gameplay and the flow of Feral Druid, but you may be bringing that back with Blooming Infusion for Boomkin specifically. Again, it's just going to affect one single Wrath or one single Starfire, but so many different damage stack elements here could potentially make it something that you'll start paying attention to and try to game as best as you can. Back to the actual hero spec, we got ourselves left-hand side with Treants of the Moon. All will apply Moonfires for free on enemies every few seconds. Further down, we have a choice node with Power of Nature, which can encourage the damage aspect of your Force of Nature for Boomkin, or cause him to be better as a tanking companion in solo content. Below that, we have ways to empower them even further, where Force of Nature Treants generate additional astral power every 2 seconds, and you get 3 of them at a time as a boomkin, so it's quite a lot of resources. Or you can go with Early Spring, where Force of Nature cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds, giving you a 45-second window with these guys instead of a minute window. In the middle row, we have Expansiveness, where maximum mana is increased by 5% and maximum astral power is increased by 20. Below that, we have Cenarius' Might, entering Eclipse, increasing your haste by 8% for 6 seconds. And below that, we have another choice node with Control of the Dream. Time elapsed while your major abilities are available to be used is subtracted from that ability's cooldown after next time you use it up to 15 seconds. Affects Force of Nature, Incarnation, and Convoke the Spirits. A very complicated way to say that these abilities have cooldowns, but in very specific conditions. But if you don't like that one, you can go with Power of the Dream, where Force of Nature grants an additional stack of Dream Burst, so you'll have a little bit more of that AoE damage potential as a boomkin. Your final capstone is Harmony of the Grove. For each Force of Nature treant, it increases your damage of spells dealt by 5% per treant. So 15% overall damage buff every time you use treants, which is not necessarily a terrible buff either. So if you have all the treants, that's an extra layer of buffs that you can apply for your boomkin during your peak burst combos. Though for Keeper of the Grove healer spec, this is where Keeper ends up being a little bit more interesting, I'd say, compared to Boomkin, except for the whole Blooming Infusion combination, which is kind of just wild to wrap your head around, because the Grove Guardians will amplify your next healing ability to create 2 Dream Petals, which gives healing to allies, stacking up to 3 charges. Further down, we have Impotent Enchantments. Reforestation grants Tree of Life for 2 additional seconds instead of the Incarnation buffs for Boomkin. Then we have Durability of Nature for restoration in this choice node, where Grove Guardians Nourish and Swiftman also apply a minor Cenarian word to your allies, which will give them healing over time next time they take damage. Below that, with Bounteous Bloom, we have Grove Guardians healing is increased by 20%, so you can make it more effective or reduce the cooldown with Early Spring. And further down, with Harmony of the Grove, each of your Grove Guardians increases your healing done by 3% while active, and you can kind of combine and use Grove Guardians anytime you want to. You have 3 charges, and you get to put them out separately for any target that you wish, kind of at different moments, so you can bank a bunch of them for a really key situation, or use them sporadically throughout an encounter to boost your healing from moment to moment here and there, which gives you a little bit more control when you need that healing amplified. There is, however, a little bit of a difference on the alpha versus live as to how Grove Guardians work. So you'll notice really quickly here, if I place 2 abilities here, if I place these 2 against each other, you will see that Grove Guardians has a GCD. And when I use a Grove Guardian, all other abilities also go on the GCD. This is a little bit different than live, where Grove Guardians have a little bit more of a rambunctious type of interactions. where they're not really following GCD in the same way, which can sometimes actually make him a little bit more fluid to use on the live realms in comparison. But either way, they can still be utilized on any of your allies, whether you're in cat form, whether you're in bear form, whether you're normal humanoid night elf form. So the ability still has decent responsiveness, but the GCD changes I think are going to maybe impact how you end up approaching the spell specifically. But besides this, I feel like the Grove Guardians fit Restoration Druids a little bit more because they're kind of utilized as a way to amplify your healing directly, while giving you a bunch of little passives here and there to further empower your healing output, letting you kind of scale your damage, while still maintaining a very passive playstyle, the one that ends up synergizing with Grove Guardians, since they're so good for restoration already, even without the tiers that we have currently in Dragonflight. But with Keeper, I kind of already expected that it's going to have a better leaning towards Resto, just because of how you can kind of scale these Grove Guardians when you want to, how you want to, and the spec kind of synergizes around that ability, where for the most part, Boomkins haven't played with Treants in quite a while, and the talent tree didn't really shift them to be something that can be easily picked up from the talent tree. So I assumed there would be a little bit more friction for Boomkin, but it actually ended up being kind of okay. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what I think about all of these hero specs. There are some stuff that I liked, some stuff that I didn't, but the question is, which one of them did you find the most compelling out of all the options we have available? For Druids, there's just a ton of options. So you have options left and right, center. There's so many different flavors for you to pick from between Guardian, Feral, Boomkin, and Resto. And even as a class kid, there's just a lot of options here. But in general, that's probably the most amount of options we've had and the most amount of flavor that you can achieve from one singular class, which I think is a benefit of the Druid in general. And with that being said, which one do you like the most? Let me know all that in the comments below. Which ones do you like the least as well? Which one are you probably going to end up playing in the future? Are you currently leaning to play maybe a Guardian Druid that weaves into cat form from time to time? Are you excited to play the Grove Guardian Restoration with all your trees enhancing your healing? Are you ready to embrace the moon as a balanced Druid in the future? And what do you think about Wildstalker as a potential Feral Druid bleed build that doesn't really change your rotation, but just enhances the goodness of those bleeds? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.